especially in New Zealand, you said the New Zealand part of it, maybe it's still quite friendly and small, but there are a lot of places that are in New Zealand as well. How do you get funding, start a business, grow it, get support, get government backing in a way, in an asset class that people are still very sceptical on?
I will be honest and say that we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We were just like, this is a problem, we can solve it, and we just sort of went step by step from there. But it was incredibly difficult. I mean, it still is. Things that you would take for granted if you were starting a business, like, what are the basics of a business? Getting a bank account, getting insurance, being able to advertise on, platforms, all of those things were closed to us. As a crypto business, it's very hard to get banking. When we started, YouTube, Google, Facebook, all of those digital platforms would not allow us to advertise. Most of them still don't. And so all of these things that, are just kind of 101 of business and entrepreneuring were not open to us. We had to find different ways. We had to be very innovative. A lot of hustle, and it was a really hard first couple of years, and there were a lot of times that I just almost packed it all in because I was like, I just can't deal with another bank saying no or another regulator, finding out that there was technically maybe GST on cryptocurrency, and we were possibly, selling a product with 1% margin when we owed 15% in GST. Like, that was a nightmare moment to go through, and all these kind of things that in a traditional market, something that is well understood, well regulated, embraced by the mainstream, you just don't have those sort of difficulties. And so I mean, your comment around getting government support, I mean, that has still yet to happen. I think that's an area which there is a real opportunity for New Zealand to have, an advantage in this area, like, something that you could think of it as, say, regulatory arbitrage. If New Zealand were a country that had really clear, really innovative and, open regulation for this space, we could attract a lot of businesses in, because that complexity, that uncertainty of not having clear regulatory guidance is very hard for companies in blockchain and crypto. And as if we look at this, with the idea of this is the next wave of internet invention and adoption, it is a creation of value and transfer of digital value is an immense opportunity and something that will have a very huge impact on how our world works in the future. That's going to be an industry and an economic impact for New Zealand that could be absolutely immense, and a really big opportunity if we were to grab that. And
not just rely on property prices going up and exporting milk.
Exactly, yeah.
Sounds quite sensible. Simon, I think the interesting thing about where your journey's taken you is that art is at the forefront of social trends. And so when you think about your career and how it's shaped crypto as an artist, but also crypto has shaped what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I'm not overly interested about the current price movements, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
Sure.
I think this asset class is going to be volatile. But where do you see it going? Because you perhaps are right at the precipice of where this asset class goes next, and maybe that's also related to NFTs, but how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I am a little bit domain specific, I think, in my knowledge, because as you say, it's so vast and you kind of like don't know exactly. So from an artist perspective and from an NFT perspective, I think there's a lot more to happen sooner. I think, as I say, when I first made an artwork in 2016 at a major art biennale about crypto, like, I really literally had to produce and explain a video about what it was, because otherwise I couldn't do anything sophisticated in terms of saying what it is. You can't just put I don't know, it's like a number in front of people and expect them to resonate with it, when you're making an artwork.
Sort of an IKEA instruction manual.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I hired an advertising company. I mean, this is part of my artistic language anyway. I use the language of commerce a lot. But like, anyway, I produced a kind of, it was an art video, but it was also an explainer video to kind of explain what the claims around blockchain at least were looking like at the time, and then I could kind of do something with it, Now you don't have to do that anymore. Like, you say blockchain, you say Bitcoin, you even say Ethereum, and, you might even say Polygon or something else. People know what they're talking about. NFTs as a kind of, as a story, making art in the space a lot more broadly appealing. And I think the other thing is, art relies a lot on different ways of funding, and I think there's a lot of people willing to do a lot of risky things in the crypto world who have money, and a lot of people who who are, I think, investors in crypto are attracted to doing things that don't always make sense to everybody else, and I think art is very comfortable in that space, but always needs partners to help do crazy things. That's what we do. Like, art is by definition an exception. If it's not an exceptional thing, it's just a thing. So I'm always looking for partners who have vision and appetite to do things that are completely crazy. And I find that more and more in crypto easier to find than in the traditional spaces where art usually gets funding. So, I mean, we're lucky in New Zealand to have a lot of government support for art, but that is very highly competitive, and it tends to focus on a particular mandate that is set at a centralized level. I think one of the nice things about a space like crypto, and I mean, I'm based in Germany, but I also always think of myself as like an international person. I guess I feel a cultural affiliation with people who like crypto too, because the kind of supranational the conception of the self is something that I think I really relate to. Like, I'm a permanent resident in Germany, grew up in New Zealand. New Zealand's got a complicated history of self and claims to the space. I feel much more comfortable saying I'm internet first and kind of like everything else second. And I think I don't know. That's a bit of a rambling answer. I see the future as, I guess, short answer. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think it's easier than ever to start conversations with people who are interested in doing crazy things, doing crazy cultural things. And I think there's a lot more to come. Whether NFTs as an asset class continue to be super important to that infrastructure, or whether there's other crypto-based infrastructure for art, I'm not sure. But I guess because there's a lot of investment and care already given into NFTs, some version of NFTs will happen. I'm really excited about the merge, the emergent Ethereum coming together, the moving to proof of stake.
Can you explain to our listeners what that means in practice?
Yeah, sure. So you guys will know this, but Bitcoin is based on, which is the first cryptocurrency of its kind, is based on this consensus mechanism called proof of work, which basically is a system that relies on a bunch of different gaming computers around the world in various different formations, doing kind of cryptographic problems and using that to assign kind of voting power in a way, and rewarding you with currency. The people that run those systems, that whole way of doing blockchain is only one way. It's the first way, it's the biggest way, it's the most decentralized way. And Ethereum, which was an early kind of version of that system as well, also running proof of work, has since a long time been looking to change, because there's some inefficiencies with that. There's some, as everybody knows, questions around power usage and how much power proof of work as a system uses, and they're looking to move to proof of stake. There are other already existing proof of stake chains. Very visible in the art world is Tezos. A lot of NFTs on Tezos, which is a proof of stake first chain. But Ethereum is by far the biggest and most distributed chain that will be running, I guess, on proof of stake when their merge happens. They first tried to move from proof of work to proof of stake, or at least claimed they were going to try and do it in 2019. So it's been a long story of moving. But I guess I can imagine why. There's been several tests and versions of it. Many test nets, which are kind of pre-mainnet, like, I don't know, backstage networks, have already moved. And actually yesterday, Gurley, which is one of the most prominent test nets, moved also to proof of stake. But in theory, in the middle of September, the mainnet will also move to proof of stake, which is being called the merge.
I mean, it's quite hard to make it happen when there's no like head office of Ethereum in the.
That's really funny. Actually, one of the things I do have ended up doing by accident is I advise Art Basel, which is the largest art fair, on their kind of interactions with Bitcoin and blockchains. And I sat down with some of the people at Art Basel, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're looking to get into this. We really want to partner with a blockchain. And yeah, but you can't just call Vitalik. that's not the way it
Can we
works.
catch up?
Yeah,
Talking about partnership, we've got some really good things in common.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it's going to be a really exciting moment when proof of stake is.
Why is it exciting?
Because I mean, it'll change the dynamics of the network quite significantly, and nobody really knows how. And I think that's one of the cool things about crypto in general is you just never know where it's going. And proof of stake, as much as you can test it on test nets, when you move it onto mainnet, nobody knows what it's going to do to the price. Nobody knows what it's going to do to the functionality. In theory, it'll speed things up, make things easier, make things quicker. But like it will, critics say that it will centralize in terms of decision making, because instead of like having to set up a bunch of machines all over the world and relying on a network of machines that are already set up in a quite distributed fashion because of the way that the network is grown, proof of stake very basically like relies on people staking some of the ETH that they already have as a kind of substitute for the mining process with machines, and nobody really knows what it'll mean when people who are holding a lot of ETH get those decision-making kind of votes rather than people in this very other network of hardware. So a lot of unknowns, but I guess it could mean that it's easier to adopt, that it's faster to use, that some of these kind of pushbacks on crypto and Ethereum in particular about price and price of getting a transaction done and speed of settling a transaction will completely disappear.
And the media headlines around environmental impact
Will also disappear. So I guess it could mean a lot more interest, a lot more adoption, a lot quicker, etc. That's what other people are saying. In some ways, but there will be people who want to discredit the move to proof of stake, say that proof of work is a much better system, etc., more distributed. So I don't know. It's very hard to tell. But I imagine net effect for the art world, it'll mean that more people are hearing about the network, easier to get into the network. Potentially will be easier for people to build things on top of the network, which work more like non-crypto things, and therefore makes it easier for people to get involved in art, buy art, sell art, make art. So yeah.
It's sort of almost the mum and dad test. They might be able to start socializing with it.
Yeah, I think that's like a secondary effect. Like first layer, all these things become easier and quicker in theory, and then it'll be easier for the application layer on Ethereum to be like more consumer.
Janine, Simon has a huge amount of knowledge in it. You have a huge amount of knowledge on the space.
just one day.
I'm still on Wikipedia, trying to spell Ethereum. When you are trying to grow a business into a market like New Zealand, where the knowledge base in general is pretty low, how do you communicate and upskill your current and potential clients and customers to get into the knowledge base that someone like Simon has? Because if they did, they would be using it a lot more, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think it's something that's very individual. Like at Easy Crypto, we've got a huge emphasis on education. We think it's really important to give people the opportunity to learn as much as they want in the space. I think, education is power, information is power, and having the opportunity for people to get accurate, informed views on things like, what is Ethereum, how does it work, why should I be interested, what, potential does it open in the future. And for a lot of people, they might start with cryptocurrency because they've heard of it as a speculative asset. They'll, maybe dip their toes in and then start to go down that rabbit hole of learning more about it and understanding. Like there is this real, cult around cryptocurrency of what it means as a democratic, decentralized value transfer that sits outside of government, outside of banks, and that's a really compelling narrative. Going back to sort of the stories that we tell around cryptocurrency.
Because there's the I'm in lockdown during COVID and I want to make a quick buck because I'm bored and there's no sport to bet on. But they're actually the core of the users are around this entirely different driver, which is that wanting to get away from government control and having a bit more freedom around decisions. And do you see that as the main network that uses Easy Crypto at the moment, or what's the balance?
I think that's, from what I've seen, is like the very, very early adopters, like back in 2014, 2015, even earlier, like those were people who had that sort of get outside of the government systems, have, maybe to buy drugs, like Simon was saying, but, a lot of them also just really driven by this idea of financial autonomy and financial freedom. And, at the moment, we don't actually control the funds in our bank accounts. We live in a country which is very lawful. We have pretty good confidence that if we go to the bank, we'll get our money back out. But in a lot of countries, that's not the case. And historically, that hasn't always happened. And so the idea of having full autonomy and control over your money is a very powerful story in crypto, and something that brought a lot of people into it originally. What we see today is, I don't think most people come into crypto for that. They're probably not even aware of that. But that is one of the education avenues that people can go down and, really get interested in. But I don't think it's the majority of people. I don't think most sort of mom and pop investors out there, or retail investors, that's probably not what interests them. And it's quite an interesting trade-off in cryptocurrency, because you have this opportunity for very sovereign control of your own wealth, but that trades off against simplicity and ease of use, and all the stories about people losing access to their funds, losing their own keys. In cryptocurrency, there isn't a help desk that you can call to be like, oh, I locked myself out of my account, can you let me back in? You're fully in charge of your own wealth, or you can be. And if you do choose to be fully in charge of your own wealth, that is completely, at your risk and at your cost, that if you mess up, or if you, lose that hard drive in a landmine, in a landfill, that there's no coming back. So I think for us at this point in the industry, it's this really interesting dichotomy between that sovereignness, but also the desire for people to have someone else look after their money and someone else be that backstop. And I think it's an interesting...
And the social acceptance that that's just going to be okay.
Yeah, and also like the social change for people of, do I actually want to be in control of my own money, or do I want a third party to still hold that for me because I trust a third party more than I trust myself? And I think what we're going to see going forwards is probably both of those things being, there will be those two different camps in crypto, the hold it yourself and the have someone else hold for you. And I don't think the hold it yourself will ever win over the mainstream. It's just not, what we're used to, what we want, and perhaps what that common narrative is, unless we get to a point where we really can't trust governments and banks. But I don't think in New Zealand that's, anytime soon.
It's interesting, Simon, you might have a view on this, but when you're talking in the US about crypto, that is right at the forefront, is that, the complete mistrust of government,
Right.
and perhaps one of the drivers of why early adoption happened there, so much faster than anywhere else. Do you get that sense in Europe as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question, and particularly I'm really interested to hear Janine and actually you both speak about what it's like in New Zealand, because I don't have so much experience of it, even though I'm from here. I'm not really tied into crypto circles here, actually. But yeah, I mean, the anti-nation state message in the US was very resonant, and as you know, it's anyway like a political tool. Right? It's a narrative lever even outside of crypto. So the fact that crypto kind of was able to, I guess, lock into that as it grew was, I think, an important driver of interest. In Europe, it's also a little bit like in between. I mean, Germany and where I live and different parts of Europe, people are generally fairly trusting. I think the state maybe not quite as trusting as New Zealanders are of New Zealand. I think here there's a high level of trust in the state, as far as I can tell, and with good reason. It provides a good service. But yeah, I think the US, there's all these volatile, I guess, narrative cracks in that story, but it's also just vast, right? It's just a really big country, lots of different types of people in it, and with lots of different realities. And yeah, I think the gap between somebody at the top of the triangle's experience and somebody at the bottom is really huge in the US, and perhaps less huge here, less huge in Germany and in Europe. So I guess there's less narrative opportunity there. But I was really interested to hear you say that the reasons why people get involved here are changing. And I'd also, I mean, I don't know if this is appropriate to do it at the stage, James, but I'm also very curious on your role and your involvement in crypto here. As I understand it, you were very early in your field convincing people that it was something worth doing. What were the narratives that you found useful with your peers, like saying, hey, this is something that we really need to, get into now. It's other people in other countries are not doing this, but we should. Like, how did you convince people?
Look, I think it's a really interesting question. I think it's one that we discussed as a team and as a firm quite intensely.
Yeah, I bet.
And I think it comes from hopefully the same avenues that you both have come from, which is, hey, this is a new asset class. How often does this happen in your lifetime?
Right.
And you can deal with that in two ways. You can go, it'll never take off, or I'll deal with it when it does.
Right.
And then I'll quickly scramble to learn as much as I can. And we were laughing before, but the internet will never take off type of analogy. Or you can go the other way, and you can go, actually, I'm going to be really curious about this. And hey, it might not be something that's interesting, but this looks like a monumental change in the landscape of how we deal with really simple concepts like payments and value.
Right.
That why not learn about it?
But there's one thing learning about it, and another thing saying like we're going to take a lot of trusted money from people in New Zealand that have given to quite a trusted brand, right? Who probably expect you to do certain things, probably not expect you to go with something that in theory at any point could go to zero, right? Like that's got to be a very hard decision to
absolutely.
to make.
And when you're investing, it's all about what the risk return is, and really that comes down to therefore what the size of the position is in your portfolio.
Right.
And absolutely there's uncertainty, but there's uncertainty around all asset classes. Oil prices went negative in 2020. If you owned anything to do with oil, you were not at zero, you were underwater. But I think what really interested us is, and I guess the catalyst, and we talked to our clients before about this, the real catalyst for us to go in with some confidence is that adoption by the mainstream. So in 2020, near the end of 2020 and early 2021, big corporate banks were holding it in custody. There were platforms on banks that we had long-term relationships with. You didn't actually have to buy the physical crypto at the start. You could just use futures contracts.
Right.
And so the journey, I always sort of attain it to, you can't go from having none in your portfolio to having a big position in your portfolio with your own personal NZ Funds wallet.
Right.
But if you just go through the journey step by step, let's look at and research it. Then let's think about using futures contracts. Then let's set up custody and maybe own the physical. And then actually let's use it as a risk management tool. When crypto is going up, we can help our clients profit from it and learn about and be educated by it. But when it's going down, we don't have to be there, or we can even hedge our portfolios using crypto, and it's a great hedge versus other asset classes like the technology sector. So I think it's like your journey. It didn't just sort of go from nothing to wham. It bubbled away.
And is DeFi a part of that for both of you as well? Like, is that something that resonates, or is something that's very active in both of your situations?
I think it's like the start.
Right.
For us, it was it's just a natural journey into looking at DeFi. NFTs are really interesting, and not just for us, perhaps it's not the art itself, but it's the platforms and the organisations that are supporting those artists and musicians and things like that. It's just like investing in a tech startup, but in a different
more
way.
volatile.
Yeah, but a bit more volatile.
Depending on the company, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, everybody. Have you heard of Pets.com? The company. Well,
Made an artwork about that.
Okay.
Well, I made a crypto artwork, but my biggest NFT.
We've got room, and if you want to join the investment team,
I'd love to. But I made a piece called .com Sounds, which is my biggest NFT project to date, which is I chose 20 amazingly spectacular burnouts from 2001's crash and decided to kind of resurrect them in Web3 via NFT. So Pets.com was one of those, but also amazing companies like Cashwars.com, FinancialPrinter.com, StickyNetworks.com, Funbug.com, like all these amazing .coms that you've never heard of. Funbug, actually, the founder of that went on after the crash to create GoPro, so it's not some unknown people. But I kind of took those assets. I plugged them into an early version of what everybody now is using, like a DALL-E type thing, where it's you write a description in to an AI and it makes an image. And I said, company that called Pets.com that looks at selling pets to the world or something like that, and then it would dream up a bunch of logos for what that might have been, and then I gave those selections to a legend in NFTs, the artist that drew the cats for CryptoKitties. So it was a collaborative piece, and I said, hey, look, you look at all these machine-generated assets, and you create one beautiful version of one of those, one finished version in your own kind of aesthetic, and that will be our top-tier CEO asset, and then we'll sell the machine learning logos as a kind of middle management asset, and we'll restart these companies as a seance in Web3. So that was .com seance. So pets.com stories, I think, and these stories have kind of boom and bust. I think, again, from a cultural perspective, from an artist perspective, it's such a compelling thing, right? It's like life, things come, things go. Things are very exciting for a moment and then seem horrible the next. And I think those financial stories, those company stories, for me, reframing them as cultural stories, but being able to do that within a kind of new asset is also just the most exciting thing to be able to do as an artist.
I mean, what a great introduction, I guess, to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the volatility that we've had recently. I was at a conference earlier this year where there were thousands of people, but even more surprising, thousands of companies showcasing their winners.
Where was it?
This was in the US at the Bitcoin conference.
Oh, right.
Bitcoin Miami.
Yeah, Bitcoin Miami, yeah.
And what was both amazing was the amount of people and just the total acceptance of the asset class amongst 40,000 people that attended. But also there's just a number of companies involved, and perhaps it was like the .com boom. Sometimes you look at the price volatility, and that's going to cause some companies to no longer be able to exist in their current form, and that's kind of a good thing, because out of the tech, and I'm not saying, talking to an artist about Amazon, there's probably heaps of work you can do about that company, but
also.
Of course, it has come out of the ashes as an amazing company. Now you can discuss whether it's provided a social good or not to the community, but what an amazing story from a technology blow up in the early part of the century. But Janine, how do you see the volatility play out in terms of you see in the media, that's the end of cryptocurrency. It was really fun, but now it's time to look at something else.
I wonder if Simon's done artwork for every time someone's called the end of Bitcoin or the death of crypto.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, there you go, next week. I gotta say, Simon's job sounds very fun. I'm like, I picked the wrong thing. But no, it's an interesting one, right? Because, we talked before about how, it's easy to think, I'm too late, I've missed the boat, and that's every time it goes up, and then every time it goes down, it's like, that's the end of that, it's, it's never coming back. And I don't think either of those statements are true. What we see with the volatility, you have to sort of step back and take a long-term view on this and sort of look at, fundamentally, is this asset class and is the technological use case this is providing something that is going to help the world in the future? And if you think about the way we do value at the moment is not digital, but our lives are increasingly digitizing. Everything we do is moving into digital spheres, and digital is more efficient, more effective. It enables, cross-border, enables instantaneous, it's low cost. And so financial markets will move digital, financial products and services will become digitized. And which cryptocurrencies will be the winners in that? That's hard to tell. How will that interplay with central bank digital currencies, with private sector currencies, which so far, I think, Libra, as an example, haven't fared particularly well, but I think those will become things in the future. And NFTs have been a really interesting foray for private sector companies into cryptocurrency in a way that is more accepted than, say, launching a coin. So that's sort of the big picture around, the volatility is very much small, right now what's happening this week, this month. Long term, I think there's, very good reason to be bullish on cryptocurrency, not financial advice. But in the short term, the volatility is fascinating. It's really interesting being at the coalface and seeing what is moving cryptocurrency, what is making the changes. What I've seen this year is you've got, the financial markets overall are down around, 17%, tech stocks down around 27%, and crypto down around 47% was, the last figures I saw. So it's mirroring what is happening in the traditional financial markets, but just taking it a little bit more extreme, more volatile. And I think this volatility is driven by partially the immaturity of the sector. We've got a sector that is very, very liquid, like it's 24/7 traded, which you don't see in most other markets. So it can respond very quickly. It's had a lot of institutional money coming in, like you're talking, James, in 2020, 2021. There was a lot of institutional funds coming in, which provides this, I guess, risk-averse large positions that can be traded very, very liquid, very mobile.
Yeah, they're less likely to be hodlers.
Exactly, and that drives a lot of the volatility. And then, of course, you've got all of the macroeconomic uncertainties, which tend to shape the crypto markets more because they've got that liquidness. You see that maybe we call it liquefaction in those markets much more quickly. So yeah, the short-term volatility is really interesting. It's fascinating being at the coalface of seeing how that drives retail customer behaviour. But personally, as an investor myself, I just sort of step back and kind of ignore the day-to-day price movement and just sort of take that long-term view.
Does it provide opportunity for your business to maybe broaden the number of different cryptos on Easy Crypto because people want to diversify their assets, or is it something that people just have gone, okay, this is really interesting, I'm just going to stick to Bitcoin until things play out? How have you seen that?
Yeah, so we have we sell around 160 different crypto assets, and we're always adding more. We're sort of very responsive to our customers can vote for what they want us to list next, and as long as something's not a clear Ponzi scheme or otherwise a bad choice, we'll pop it up on the platform. And we see a lot of interesting trends in what people are buying and selling at different times with different price action. There is always a skew towards Bitcoin and Ethereum. We've seen Solana be a hugely more popular coin in the last couple of months, which is interesting because that network has had a lot of challenges and also a lot of volatility. But in terms of sort of the opportunity that the volatility gives to expand into more coins, I think actually when markets are dropping, people tend to move more towards this, I don't know if I'd call them safer coins, but let's say larger cap coins, Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then when markets start to move up again, we see that sort of diversification back out into more altcoins, and I guess people taking more of a punt on what might be increasing in value more and trying to find things that will grow at a faster rate than the big cap coins.
Interesting, and it's something that I guess is ever evolving and news flow driven, but it's also, as the world returns to a little bit more normality, perhaps you're getting holders that are less around making a fast buck and more about long-term holders like you are personally in this space.
Yeah, and I think also that what you were saying with your with NZ funds is like it's around a portfolio management, and that's what we're seeing a lot of is people looking at cryptocurrency as, okay, this asset is matured to a point where it is worth looking at as part of a diversified portfolio. There's a lot of commentary around, maybe say up to 5% of your portfolio in cryptocurrency. Obviously, some of us like me have a lot more, but for a traditional investor, for someone who has a wealth management approach across a portfolio of assets, this is one that we see people putting into. And right now, this is a relatively comparatively to where we were at the beginning of this year, last year, this is actually a good entry point for people who are looking at having that diversification of assets in their portfolio.
Can I also ask a question related to, and both of you probably are more aware of this than I am, so you're talking about your company is providing access for consumers to the asset class, right? In some ways, that's the primary goal of it. Do you see other peers in the space building, like New Zealand-based people, or coming up with, or entrepreneurs based here building things on top of existing crypto networks like Ethereum, like on the application layer? Is that a big scene here?
It's something I think, again, is that opportunity. We could be a lot bigger because New Zealanders are very innovative. We've got good tech-savvy capabilities. There's a couple of great projects like Akala, which is it's a DeFi layer on top of Polkadot. Their team is based here in Auckland. We've got a couple of other sort of like innovations that sit on top of cryptocurrency or blockchain networks, but not as many as I would expect given how innovative New Zealanders are. And I think possibly that comes down to the regulatory complexity, or possibly it's just this is still a nascent space. And but there is some interesting stuff going on. I'd love to see more happening out of New Zealand.
The one that I know about is again, maybe this is coming more from the other side, but there's a project called Scuttlebutt, which I don't know if you got. Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing project. It's like more peer-to-peer internet, but there's an adjacency to crypto and assets, and that's has a big New Zealand footprint, which I found really cool.
I wonder if in the early adoption phase of it for New Zealand, we're in the early adoption phase, even though we're probably 10 years behind, which.
Or not, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that narrative anymore.
But I think, it's a good challenge. But I wonder if the initial stages is people like you did with your art go overseas, and so there's some I do know of many New Zealanders who are overseas within the space, connecting internationally.
For sure.
And then it takes those people to even visit, like you are, and we'll get on to why you're back, because I know you're here to see your parents, I'm sure, but also I'm sure it's not just for that reason. I get told off when I see my family who live in the UK, and they always are sceptical why I'm visiting. And I say it's to see you, and they go, no, it's not. But anyway, I digress. But it's a. Do you think that it's just there's lots of people learning about it elsewhere? It's an international asset class. There's no borders. You've got how many different countries?
Yeah, we have staff in 11 different countries, and we started as a remote first business, and we still are heavily remote. And I think to that point of there are a lot of New Zealanders all around the world doing amazing things.
Yeah.
And there is no Simon's a borderless artist. We're a borderless company. There's a lot of ability for people to work from wherever in the world, contribute to New Zealand projects, or just to the wider New Zealand knowledge base in the space. And I think there is a lot of that happening.
I love leaning in more, actually, again from a cultural perspective, into that version of being a New Zealander. I guess, again, just to speak purely from that perspective, I love where I grew up. I love coming back here. I love interactions with people who are here. I love meeting people who are from here over in other parts of the world, and they're often doing very interesting things. This is also something interesting, and I'd love to see some kind of self-imagining of the national identity lean more into that side of, yes, we're from here, but we also have a very, many of us are ancestrally travelers, independent of different backgrounds. We all have international outlooks and roots. We're kind of a nation of different types of travelers, and I think leaning into that version of a national identity in the future would be something that I would really like to see flower, rather than trying to say we're restricted to this island, we're restricted to the things that happen on this island, everything that's symbolic about this country is important to this island only. I think this is actually one of the amazing opportunities about our story. It's a really complex one, and there's old ways of seeing it as international through the colonial history, but there's newer ways of seeing it as international through kind of a lot of asset class activity. And I know New Zealand is quite an advanced place financially anyway, right? It's not just crypto where there's future first activity happening, right? There's other...
Absolutely, I think it's we've made leaps and bounds in that respect, and I think it's from that attitude of we can't just stay here and look within our borders, that you have to be open and I think that's why I'm really positive about crypto for New Zealand, because I think there is this willingness to accept new things and new technology and new people and learn about it. Simon, in the time we've got left, and Janine, in terms of what's next, so we'll start with you, Simon. You're here for there's two exhibitions going on.
That's right.
I hope your parents don't listen to this. I'll get into trouble.
Oh, they know. They've been at every event that have happened. Yeah, I mean it's great to see my mum and dad and my sister and my nephew.
And your dad he is an artist as well.
He is an artist. Yeah, he made books, and actually he's part of the show. So I've made two exhibitions, one at Michael Lett Gallery, and one at the University of Auckland's kind of Kunsthalle, which is the Gus Fisher Gallery, just on Shortland Street here. Both are called Creation Stories. It's a collaboration with an academic, a friend of mine, who is an expert in indigenous space. She's at the University of Auckland's Architecture School. But we came together over exactly these types of international stories that I was hinting towards, because we started talking about Samoa once when I came back on a visit, and she's Samoan, but she's also has roots in Tonga and the Solomon Islands, but also in Zug, in Switzerland. And turns out her cousin is a guy called Luca Müller, who is a very important guy at MME, which is a legal firm. And Luca designed the legal framework for the Ethereum token sale. And so we started talking about the history of value and family connections, and my family has a connection to Samoa as well, because my great-grandfather was the first Chief Justice of Samoa when New Zealand took the occupation off the Germans. So there was all these kind of interesting interconnections that I started to map with her, and we made these kind of giant diagrams of financial stories, of company stories, of colonial stories, and we kind of put them together and kind of made them physical using kind of cabling factory here, Swartec, at Ardmore, and they build it into these kind of giant webs of cables, which we then also turned into ETH miners. So there's literally family stories producing value in these spaces as sculptures. There's also resonances with other artworks that we put alongside other ways of seeing value through interconnection. So painters like Buck Nin, hugely visible Māori painter, early Māori contemporary artist. There's paintings of his that also kind of bring together different layers of stories. Obviously, in cultures like Māori culture, family is more foregrounded as you're kind of more of an embedded self where you're connected all the time to your ancestors, etc. I don't want to paraphrase that in a bad way, but we looked at different types of framing interconnection and social value and made these kind of giant social graphs in a way that...
And it sort of showed you the journey, and some of them are even the journey of fiat currency to crypto.
Exactly.
Tied in with all the influences of people.
Yeah, so another story which is weird is that my great uncle Gilbert Wilson was the head of the Reserve Bank during the 50s and 60s, and he stewarded the move from pounds to New Zealand dollars, which is also another interesting kind of financial story, but a family story. So yeah, lots of crazy interconnections there.
I don't believe in fate, but it just feels like this is a natural journey for you.
It's a very natural journey for me, but that's one thing that I'm working on. And the other thing in terms of making sculptural miners at the moment, it's, as I mentioned, ETH miners are they might be at the end of their story. So it could be the end of a creation story for a particular type of ETH production. And I'm also producing an NFT at the moment, which will, with a company called JPEG.space, which is like a beautiful NFT curatorial protocol project, where they are producing a very special kind of memorial for the merge, where a bunch of NFTs will get sold to support the ETH developers. Because actually, if you're an ETH developer, there can be upside from holding if you invest it, but you actually don't get paid that much. And the ETH Foundation is structured in a particular way where, the rewards are not in salaries in the same way that they might be in other parts of technology or finance. So we're doing a kind of fundraiser where I'm developing a special memorial NFT alongside other artists for the merge. So that's kind of like not about these two exhibitions, but simultaneously that'll happen while the exhibition is on.
Fantastic. And Janine, with your business and we've seen stability in crypto assets for the past probably 2 weeks. So.
even gone.
That's about 12 years in crypto years, right?
Exactly right. No, but in all seriousness, what's next for Easy Crypto in your own personal journey around, where you want the business to go, but also, your exploration through this asset class and maybe other things that you're doing?
Yeah, so for us, we had a really interesting time. Last year we did our Series A raise, which I think was a record set for the largest first raise for any company. We'd been bootstrapped up to that point, and then we managed to get a whole lot of investment from New Zealand and overseas investors, which has really set us up well to weather over the, call it a crypto winter or bear market, whatever the next, period of years. I think will probably be less frothy in the crypto markets, which is good. It means for us that we can really focus on product innovation, building amazing tech, and really sort of working on what is next at the forefront of cryptocurrency. So the first thing that's dropping for us from that, which should be out in the New Zealand market in October, is a custody wallet, so really helping to solve that problem for Kiwis and our overseas customers as well around that journey from fiat into crypto needs to land in a wallet somewhere. Traditionally, we haven't been a wallet provider, but now we see that that's a role that, with our ability to develop really good user experience and do things really safely, that's a space that we want to move into and play in. So that's the next big move for us. And then off the back of that, we'll obviously be enabling a whole lot of other product innovation, things like, looking at what's happening in DeFi, bringing the best of that world into our platform and offering for our customers, a safe and easy way to use a whole range of different services that crypto is innovating on, and really leveraging more of what's at the forefront there, which is a really exciting space to be playing in.
Exciting. So plenty of things happening, and fantastic to get that Series A, because that gives you the runway and the ability and flexibility to do it.
Absolutely, and it couldn't have been better timed. I mean, I think the tech markets and sort of publicly listed companies have all taken a bit of a dive since October, so we had good timing there. But I do believe these things will come back up, and it's all cyclical. And luckily, we're in a position now that we don't need to worry about funding for a couple of years.
Well, Janine,
not like ETH developers.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, you should buy generously.
I will.
to end it there, but then I thought a better way to end it is, do you have any more questions for each other? Because, you know, this is a community asset class, and this is a time where there's not often that you're in the same room as each other. So,
I mean, I'm going to ask a very obvious question. Do you have plans to touch NFTs at any point, or do you already do so?
We don't at the moment, but
Yeah.
again, this is this type of thing that having custodial solutions really enables. So definitely keen to. NFTs is such a fascinating topic, though, and I know we're wrapping up soon, so I won't dive into it. But I think there's a lot for us around. Our 3 pillars at Easy Crypto are around ease, ethics, and education. And so making sure we have the education available for people as they work in the space, but also that ethical lens of there's a lot of scams that are happening always at the forefront of cryptocurrency, and NFTs is a bit of a ripe area. And, you know, it's unfortunate that something that is really a gateway for a lot of mainstream people coming into our industry is also really rife with Ponzi schemes and different scams. So
I have an idea. You guys should build the first private collection of blue chip NFTs that a company holds in New Zealand as a way also of doing education to see which things are not Ponzi schemes. That would be such a wonderful contribution to my sphere and also lift the visibility here, because I think, again, art NFTs are not hugely visible here, and so it would be great to see somebody on the forefront like you are of providing customer access to also maybe provide a sort of what would you say, like a role model leader in what kind of crypto culture could look like.
And that's a really interesting parallel to a lot of, you know, big investment companies and houses in here in New Zealand have quite amazingly wealthy private art collections.
Exactly.
So for us to model that behavior, and, you know, not necessarily that we're going to build a lot of wealth out of buying NFTs, but, you know, at least showcasing, you know, what is out there, and an interesting parallel to how traditional finance have done things.
Exactly. I mean, there's also a lot of value there, and those institutional, I guess, collections, those private collections that some of the big corporate firms have here in New Zealand, or New Zealand art, are like really, really amazing. And they bought them at a time where I think that asset class probably also was a little bit questionable. Like, do you really spend X amount of money on a contemporary artist's painting that was made this year? Do you really know what it's going to be worth in 10 years? I bet they didn't know at that point. So I think there's parallels there to double down on New Zealand's role in this.
it sounds like we've got a pretty good collaboration, and I know this person that's sort of working on an NFT.
Well, that was actually my question for Simon. I was interested to know what platforms, like what blockchains are you using for your NFTs, and what platforms, and sort of what's your decision-making criteria in choosing which platforms and blockchains you work with?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. For me, I really try to mint on ETH if I can, because it's the biggest network, the most artists there, the most commercial action is there, the most visibility is there, the most infrastructure is there. OpenSea is like the kind of, and Zora, those are maybe the 2 most visible secondary platforms that also you can mint for primary, but they're kind of like the auction houses, the kind of Sotheby's and Christie's, let's say, of the crypto first art world. Yeah, I'll mint on ETH if I can. I've also minted on Tezos, which I think has an interesting community as well. They're putting a lot of effort into arts infrastructure. I also have minted on Polygon because it's free, and is also still visible on OpenSea, which I think is a big place for discovery of NFTs. But those are the ones I've mostly touched. I haven't touched Solana, even though Melania did the Solana one. I thought, well, that's maybe not. But yeah. But again, I'm not kind of against minting on any particular platform, and I think things like Polkadot are interesting players. You know, Parity is based out of Berlin, so it's also kind of an interesting thing on the doorstep. But yeah, I think just the visibility, the history, the flexibility of ETH-based coins are the most attractive to me. And with the merge, I mean, the only pushback you ever get on that as an artist, rightly so, because people are really interested in the art world and in culture around the environment. They often ask questions about the power consumption of minting on ETH, and I think with the merge and those questions disappearing, I can't see other platforms at this stage, or other coins at this stage, being more attractive.
Janine Granger, Simon Denny, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think I could do this for the next couple of hours, but time has told us that we have to draw this to a close. But look, your journeys are so interesting, and we really, really appreciate your thoughts and views, and would love to do this again. And like you say, you know, one day in crypto land is sort of 12 years, but imagine catching up in a year or so's time and doing it again and
Have
see
a school
what's changed.
reunion?
Yeah,
school
I would
reunion.
love that. I mean, thank you very much. It's really, really great to speak to people here who are as interested and passionate as you both are. That's so inspiring for me, coming back and connecting with people who are working at this level. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Thanks, Simon. Great.